As a pediatric allergist, I treat children who have some of the most common chronic conditions, including allergic rhinitis, eczema, food allergies, and asthma. And as you can imagine, I get a lot of questions from parents, referring providers. And I noticed early in my career that I was getting a lot of the same questions over and over again. And in fact, they seemed to be more misconceptions, things I hadn't learned in my training. Questions such as, does my child with egg allergy have to avoid the influenza vaccine? Is there such a thing as a hypoallergenic dog? Is it true that gluten is the cause of all that ails humanity? I became interested in the origins of some of these misconceptions, and I decided to look into this myself. And I wanted to look from an evidence-based approach. What does the research show? And I found that actually most of these had been addressed before, and many of them had been refuted, some even decades ago. So I kept asking, why do I keep hearing these things over and over again? And then I did something that changed my career forever. I did the same exact search from the patient perspective. I used the same key terms, the same questions, using Google, Yahoo, and things like that. And as you can imagine, what I found was very different from what I found looking through research and evidence-based information. I learned such things that gluten does not cause all that ails humanity, but it's toxic mold. I also found some very interesting theories as to why we have a rise in food allergies. I met celebrities who used their status to tout unvalidated testing measures. I came across other celebrities who made specific medical recommendations to people, including telling women to put certain things like jade eggs and wasp nests in certain orifices where they should never go. And then, of course, we're all too familiar with other physicians who are in this space using their platform for evil instead of good. After learning all this, I realized our patients don't stand a chance. They want to go online looking for credible information, but they're not finding it. I decided to do my own research. It led me to one of my favorite quotes. You can't believe everything you read on the internet. Of course, first stated by Abraham Lincoln. With my own research, I found that my colleagues in internal medicine and pediatrics actually have some of the same misconceptions that our patients have. They're being taught these things early on. And I started incorporating these ideas into my talks that I was giving on a local, regional, national level. I became a self-proclaimed mythbuster, and I learned that this generated a lot of interest. This is a screenshot from an interview I gave on MSNBC after giving a talk at a national conference regarding my allergy myths. I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law in the spring of 2013, getting him caught up to speed on my academic pursuits, and he said, you know, Dave, you should go on Twitter with this. And I looked at him and I said, what the heck is Twitter? It had been around for about 7 years. For those unfamiliar, as I was at the time, it's a social media platform where you use 140 characters or tweets, and you send out information. You communicate. You can link it to articles, pictures, things like that. And I looked into it and I said, you know what? I think this might work. And that's when I became @AllergyKidsDoc. So I went to the hospital and the media relations team, and they supported this wholeheartedly. At the time, I was one of the few physicians on Twitter. Now we have many. And they helped set me up. And this is my professional page. This is how I present myself to the world. As you can see, I'm Dr. Dave Stukus. I'm a pediatric allergy and asthma specialist. My professional affiliations, I'm dispelling myths one tweet at a time. And the reason I'm in this space is I see myself, and I try my best to bridge the gap from PubMed to Dr. Google. And I do this in a variety of different ways, but hopefully and always trying to dispense evidence-based information. So one example is about once a month I have a Mythbuster Monday. I'll send out various information about common misconceptions. This is one example of differences between food allergy and intolerance. As you can see, I actually linked it to a blog post that I wrote for our hospital's website so people can look for other information. And it is social media after all, so I try to have fun whenever I can. Our recent May the 4th Be With You Day, I compared grass pollen under the microscope to the infamous Death Star, and people who suffer from seasonal allergic rhinitis commiserated. And then every once in a while, I take off the white coat, and I present myself as a person. Now, every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, I send out a really bad joke of the week. I have yet to repeat one of these jokes over the last 4 years. The well is running dry. Now, there are benefits that come from this, which I'd like to discuss, but there's also some pitfalls. So there are cautionary tales abound of people who have sent ill-advised tweets and they've lost their careers. This was my experience. I sent this out about a year and a half after being on Twitter. As you can see, parent says, I want the Ebola vaccine for my child. This was in the midst of the Ebola pandemic. Doctor said there isn't one, but we have the flu shot. The parents said we don't believe in that. Within the next couple of hours, I got some traction. I had about 1,000 followers at the time, saw a couple dozen retweets, 200 retweets, and then Twitter sent me a message. And Twitter told me that @AllergyKidsDoc is trending in Toronto. And then 30 minutes later, New York, Washington, Chicago, Seattle, United States. And I went, oh my God, what is happening? I was on a roller coaster that had come off the tracks, going 100 miles an hour. I had no control over this. This was my experience in going viral. And I was scared out of my mind. My heart was racing, I had palpitations. Am I going to lose my career? Am I going to lose patients? What's going to happen from here? Long story short, everything settled down after several weeks, and 99.9% of it was positive. But this was my cautionary tale of once it goes out there, it's out there. So now, every time I hit send beforehand, I say, will this end my career? Now, some of the benefits that I've received as a physician include interaction with patients from across the world. Traditionally, physicians and researchers educate our patients one patient at a time in the exam room or through our peer-reviewed research studies or through giving talks and educating our colleagues. But through social media and Twitter, instead of educating one patient at a time, which takes 30 to 60 minutes in the office, I can reach thousands of people in real time. Some examples of some of the feedback I've received. This is somebody I've never met. You help me consider questions and concepts to explore further with my child's allergist. Now, this is exactly what I'm trying to do. I want to give you credible evidence-based information and then have you take that information, go back to your physician and see if this applies to you. I never, nor should anybody, dispense individual medical advice. That's not what this is for, but I can help link them to credible information. This was after I sent information about penicillin allergy testing. This person said, I appreciate the heads up. I wouldn't have known about it if you hadn't tweeted out the info. And then lastly, our patients want us in this space. I appreciate when physicians like you provide factual info to dispel myths and counter inaccurate information on Twitter. Now, I've also received requests to take on new patients. And people find me on social media, and they know what I'm all about. They know how I approach problems and how I dispense information, and they ask to come see me. One tale I'd like to discuss with you is of a woman who followed me for a couple of years. Her son had been diagnosed with peanut allergy. He was 5 or 6 years old at an early age. And he was diagnosed by testing alone, had never eaten it, never had a reaction. But none of the allergists in their town, and they live several states away, was willing to do an oral food challenge. Now, the oral food challenge is the gold standard test that we use in the office when somebody may have outgrown a food allergy or we're not quite sure if they're truly allergic. It's a very safe procedure. It's not rocket science. Come in a supervised setting. We give you gradually increasing amounts of what you might be allergic to. We monitor for any signs of a reaction. If all goes well, you're no longer allergic. This family reached out, and mom said, I want you to see my son. I took it offline. I said, I'm happy to listen to your story, see his records. And I learned that she was so scared that he was going to die from his peanut allergy. I don't know if she actually wrapped him in bubble wrap, but he had never been to a grocery store. He'd never been to a restaurant, never been to church, couldn't play Little League. They drove 10.5 hours to come see me, and I agreed to challenge him. Mom was so nervous that she waited downstairs in the coffee shop for 3 hours, crying and praying the entire time. At the end, I called her, said, it's time to come back. And she came up, and she was shaking. She said, how bad is it? What did you have to do for him? And I said, we're done. She said, well, what happened? I said, look around. Look at the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup wrappers. Look at the peanut M&M wrapper. He ate 2 servings of peanut butter. He's not allergic. And there were tears of joy. And since then, I've received updates. His first real Easter egg hunt. His first trip to Walmart. And then the comment, you can retire now and know that you made a difference. First time going to a birthday party, he ate everything everyone else ate. Now, this is a very dramatic example, but I don't know what the outcome for this family would have been without Twitter and social media. I'd like to pause for a moment, and if there's nothing else you remember from this talk, it's what I'm about to say. Twitter has made me a better doctor. And here's how. It's really hard to take complicated medical information and parse it down into 140 characters. Try it. It's difficult. I've had lots of practice at it. What it's forced me to do is keep it simple. Not only keep it simple online, but now I keep it simple with my patients. and I give them bite-sized pieces of important information that they can more readily digest. It helps me communicate, it helps them understand. I get more detail-oriented when I have to, but it helps me as a better communicator. The other way is it's given me insight. This is some feedback I received from some people on Twitter. Listen to the patient conversation, what do they care about, what are they sharing? Keeps them connected with the way patients live, social challenges of diseases, builds empathy, directs recommendations. I've learned so much from interacting with the community at large, from the United States and across the world. I take those lessons back to my patients in the form of anticipatory guidance. Let's talk about your child's transition to kindergarten, going away to summer camp, traveling, getting on airplanes with food allergy, and then I take what I learned from my families and I give it back to the online community, and it's a wonderful relationship. And then lastly, Twitter has opened up other doors to reach even more patients. Twitter gives you some analytics. This is from last month. As you can see, I sent 500 tweets in May. I'm pretty busy. An impression on Twitter means every single time one of my tweets ended up in somebody else's timeline, which happened over 540,000 times. Over 10,000 people clicked on my profile to see who I am, who I work for, what I'm about in 1 month alone. And my account was mentioned over 1,000 times. That's data from 1 month over the last 4 years. I've also been able to communicate with colleagues. I went up for promotion about a year ago, and I was able to take my involvement in social media, translate that to metrics traditionally better understood by promotion and tenure committees. And I told myself if I ever pull this off, which I did, that I'd lay the blueprint for my colleagues. And this is one example of an article I published on a popular site, Kevin MD. I've also had invitations to write articles for other platforms, reaching even more patients, including US News and World Report and the Huffington Post. So ultimately, what started with a few tweets a few years ago has really allowed me to not only just reach patients in my office setting, but reach patients from around the world. And the world interacts with itself in real time these days via social media. That's how we get our news, that's how we get our information, often 140 characters at a time. And it's my strong belief that it's up to physicians and researchers to not only join the conversation, but to lead that conversation as well. Thank you.